Hello everybody. This video is going to walk us through some of our curriculum mapping and our grade booking, and it's going to answer some of the questions that we had during the first trimester in an attempt to make things easier. This also is going to lay out the expectations a little bit for what your curriculum mapping should look like in relationship to the self-study. So I'll walk through that, and then through setting our curriculum maps up this way, we'll also talk about how it then communicates with our grade book so that when we do grades for the second and third trimester, we'll be able to be a little bit more efficient than we were the first time around. So what you're looking at here, I'm using Stephanie's account, although this will be true whether you're elementary, middle school, specials, all of these things should be able to apply to you. So the first thing we want to do when we're thinking about the second trimester and moving forward is we want to determine which of those learning targets we want accessible for us in this trimester. So I'm going to go here into LMS where our curriculum mapping is, and then I want to go here into setup. Now here's where we can access our learning targets and standards, and this will pop up with whatever standards are appropriate for that course. You may have selected some of these. Some of these may look different or not. For Stephanie, we can tell by the check which ones that she has already checked for the first trimester. So you can see that those ones are active and the rest of these are not. So if there's other standards that Stephanie wants to work on, even if it's including some of these like current events, models, graphs, diagrams, careers, there's nowhere to check that in here. She's actually going to have to create a learning target right here. She's going to have to pick her appropriate standards and hit continue. And now you see all of her standards are going to show up, including current events, models, graphs, diagrams, careers. Right now these are all selected. You probably don't want to select all of them. Whatever decisions you make here are not final. You can choose later if you would like. It will also show you on here which ones you've already selected. So astronomy, it tells us this standard has already been selected. So it gives you a heads up for that. Now, one of the questions is, what are the expectations for some of these substandards? I think particularly when you are doing your curriculum mapping and when you're especially doing your unit mapping, I think it's appropriate to just focus on these bold standards. Unless you find a substandard that really seems to hit home, you can add it if you want, but I think focusing on the bold standards is at least a good start. So for the purposes of this, and to show you that this works, I'm going to unselect all of them, but I'm going to select current events so we can see what that looks like. When I select a standard, it wants to choose all of the substandards. Again, that's up to you. For now, I'm going to uncheck it and just add this onto Stephanie's account. So that's kind of the first step. And now you'll see that we have current events that have showed up in addition to the other standards that have been selected. We can also see that that is an active standard that we are working on. So that's the first step of how do we make the standards accessible to our curriculum map so later I can go back and add them in. The second thing while we're in here then is which standards do I want to report on. Now this decision does not have to be made until report cards are due. So you really don't need to worry about this until later in the trimester, but I'm going to put it on here anyway because it's on this same page. Remember, we went to LMS and then to setup, and then we went into learning targets here, and that's where we are. So to pick and choose which standards you want to be reporting on, we have to go down to this button here where it says more, and we want to edit the grading periods that we have. So we're going to select here, and now you can see which ones are going to be active. This is current events. This is the one we just selected, remember? Let's unselect first trimester, and we'll keep it active for the second and third trimester, and we will hit save. You will see now on these learning targets, this check has been taken away. and we see that that learning target is active for the second and third trimester. That's the first part of how we make the standards accessible to us. So now the question is, well, how do we use these and what are the expectations? So now we're going to go back to LMS and we're going to go into the curricula here to set some of this up. You can see here that Stephanie, as I'm sure most of you already have some units that are laid out here. That's great. I'm going to just walk through setting up a new unit and we can set it up together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a topic here for our unit of study, whatever that unit is going to be. You can put your dates in here, and then where we want to focus on is these learning targets. So we want to add learning targets. You can see that all of the learning targets that she has active for the second semester are now here, including the one we just added in this demonstration, which is this one for current events. Before I said you can add as many or as few standards as you want in your setup. That's true. Keep in mind that they will show up here. So if you don't mind scrolling through a bunch of different standards, then feel free to have a lot selected. If you like to keep it simple, you can always go back into that setup module and add different standards as life goes on. So we're going to add this standard to this unit that we're working on. And then all we're really going to do is we're going to save it. Oops, I guess I have to put in a date here. So we'll do that. And we'll make it last 5 days. Okay, so here's our test unit that we have set up, and we've aligned some standards to it. Really, that's the most important. Okay, when the self-study team comes in, they're going to be looking at that unit level. They're not going to have time to go through all of the individual assignments and see if the individual assignments are aligned to the standards or not. So my advice moving forward is to set up this unit as you or as Stephanie goes on. The assignments that you want graded here in TeacherEase. So within this unit, we're going to have test assignment number 1. You can fill out all of your information in here. If you want to add an individual learning target to this assignment, this is where you do it. This is not a mandatory step. You do not have to do this. If you want to save yourself time, I would not recommend doing this. However, if you would like to add your standards to each individual assignment and then grade each assignment on your standards, this is the process that you would have to go through. That's a true standards-based grading system. Again, that's not the expectation. You are welcome to do that, but that's kind of like extra credit and going above and beyond. So I'm not going to add any for now. This is just my practice assignment, and I'm going to save this as soon as I fill out the other appropriate categories. Okay, so now within the curriculum mapping, I've made a unit and I've made an assignment that we have in here. You can now see if I want to go into my gradebook and go into scores and comments, this assignment should show up. Here within the gradebook, we can see that the test assignment 1 showed up. That's what we just put in. Keep in mind we did it in our curriculum mapping and it automatically linked into our gradebook. So you can go here and enter your grades and go through and fill this out. So that should make things pretty simple. What I would do then within this curriculum mapping is as the unit progresses, I would continue to add my assignments in here that I'm going to grade. Then at the very end of my unit, I might go back into this unit level here and I might edit it, and I want to make sure that these learning targets that I selected are correct. And if there's other standards that I was able to work in, now that I've done the unit, I would go back and make sure that all of the appropriate standards are in there, keeping in mind it's okay to have 2 or 3 That's really the best way and the simplest way for you all to complete your curriculum mapping. If you're really ambitious, you could go through and create a lesson every day. That is not the expectation. The expectation is to have your graded assignments in there, and those should be tied to the learning targets. For the learning targets, I would focus on the bold headers that you're doing. If you want to work in some of the substandards that are relevant, that's also appropriate, but you do not have to tie in every single substandard into your curriculum mapping. That's just not that's just going to take way too much time, and that's not the expectation, and the visiting team won't be looking for that. They just want to see that we are all kind of on the same page, and that for myself as an administrator, I can log in and see that the units are being tied to the standards. So that's kind of the basics of how I would lay out and set up my curriculum mapping and what I would do kind of moving forward. If you have questions, please feel free to come talk to me, email me, do whatever. I hope that this video helps and that moving forward things will be relatively stress-free. Thanks.